just to kind of give you an idea of what we're going to be doing, I'm going to be taking as many questions as I can. So let's just start right in. Annette sent in a question that says, if a man says he is not ready for a relationship but likes to date, is this a sign that he's not interested? So I think this is a good question. And I think there's a couple of things to just kind of point out here that are important. I think the first thing to point out is that for the most part, most of the time, men are quite literal. So if a man is saying that he's not ready for a relationship, sometimes I think it's tempting if he's got a lot going for him or you're really attracted to him to want to try to kind of win him over. And it's even possible that in some cases that might happen, but in more cases than not, that's going to be an exercise in futility, which is likely to end in disappointment and heartache. And so when she asks this question, does it mean he's not interested? He might very well be interested in actually dating and spending time with a woman and having female companionship. But if a man is saying he's not ready for a quote unquote relationship, and that's what you're looking for, may not be the best place to invest a lot of your time and energy. So that's how I would answer that one. This question came in from Zoe, and she says, I met a man online. We texted a few times, talked a few times, then met shortly thereafter. We had coffee, talked for 2 hours. He was one of the few men that I'd want to date again. The thing is, I haven't heard from him for 4 days. Frequently after going on a date, the man is interested in me and sends me a follow-up text, but this hasn't happened. I am not going to text him at this stage, but I'm wondering if I got my hopes up too high. So one thing that I've learned in doing this for the past decade plus, and also in my own many years of dating, is that sometimes the timetable and the time frame is not exactly the same for men as it is for women. So for us, 4 days feels like a really long time. And, over the years, I've had clients contact me and say, we had this really great date and we were seeing each other, or he was calling every day, and now I haven't heard from him for a few days, and maybe something's wrong. And in some cases, a man may or may not be interested, but in some cases, it's just a little different timetable. Like, one of the things that many of you know about me is I've interviewed Dr. John Gray many times, and he talks about how men have to kind of go into their cave, or he also talks about this syndrome called the rubber band syndrome, where a man kind of pulls back and then maybe comes back, like stretches back like a rubber band. So sometimes there's some of those kinds of things going on, but also I've just found, coming back to my original point, that men are not always on the same time frame. So what has happened with several of my clients over the years is maybe things were like at they kind of had a rhythm and they were seeing each other or talking every day. And then there's a little gap. And then the man actually does call them back and everything's fine. He's just like been preoccupied or busy or something for a few days. So that's one thing to keep in mind that can happen. In this case, it sounds like she's just talking about meeting someone for the very first time. And again, I still think the time frame could be a little different. Like 4 days to us as women feels like a long time, especially if we felt like a connection with someone or a little bit of interest. But I think the thing here is you got to give it a little bit of time. It's too early to know what's going to happen in this particular situation, but I just kind of wanted to talk about that from the broader perspective. Laura says, what would be the meaning of a man saying he is busy? He probably is busy. If he's saying this to you, he may not be being busy with you. He may be busy with other things. So again, I kind of come back to where I started, which is that most of the times men are quite literal, and he may actually have something going on in his life that makes him legitimately extra busy. But if he's just saying, I'm busy, and that's kind of the general mode that he's in, it may be that he's not as interested in you or not as interested in spending time with you unless his actions show up, may have him showing up in a way that shows otherwise. So with men, we pay attention to what they're doing more. than what they're saying, generally speaking. And if those things are not in harmony with each other, like if his actions don't back up his words, then that's potentially a sign that he's not really there investing in getting to know you for a real relationship. So I'm just going to mention three things here, three key things before we move on that are kind of just, general guidelines and signals that you might end up being disappointed if you continue to invest your time and attention and focus with a man that's not doing that for you. And these kind of men can eventually sometimes break your heart if you get a lot of hope and a lot of investment in that. So the first one is, he might be someone who's going to disappoint you or break your heart if he tells you, like the first question started with, if a man tells you he's not ready for a relationship, believe him. Don't try to flip him, because even if you do, he might be kind of coming in reluctantly and it might feel like a struggle. And do you really want to feel like someone is reluctantly coming into a relationship with you? I don't think you do. So that's one, he tells you. The second one is he's not prioritizing you. And when I say prioritizing you, I mean he's not investing his time, his energy, his intention, his attention into spending time with you, being in contact with you, making plans with you, getting to know you, remembering important things about you. So one of the things that I work with my clients on and teach in Mr. Right Academy is, to be aware of the energetic investment that's happening in a relationship. Because sometimes as women, we tend to be givers. That's a beautiful quality that we have and can work really well in certain aspects of our lives. But if we're over giving, especially in the early stages of a relationship, rather than bringing a man closer or drawing him nearer to us, it often has the opposite effect. And he ends up being less motivated rather than more motivated and interested in doing more. It's kind of like when a woman overfunctions, a man tends to underfunction. Okay, so that's the second one. He's not prioritizing you, and that's what I mean by that. And then the third one I mentioned already is his words or his actions are not congruent. They're not really matching up. Maybe he's saying really nice things. Maybe he's giving things as mixed signals of a sort, but he doesn't have the actions or the follow through, the prioritizing stuff that I just talked about to kind of back that up. So those are three general guidelines that might help with some of these questions. Okay, let's see. Now I'm going to look in the Q&A box here. The Celestial Professor says, I'm wondering what your take is on dating after 55 relative to what goes out energetically. I'm not 100% sure I'm understanding your question, but I can say this. I don't quite know what you mean in terms of to what goes out energetically. I did just talk about my feeling of making sure that you're matching energies. In other words, not investing a lot more of your time, attention, focus, love, affection into someone who's not doing that in your direction. So I'm not quite sure if that's along the lines of what you're asking, but what I can tell you is that most of the clients that I work with at this stage are 40s, often late 40s, 50s, 60s, and even 70s. And I have a lot of clients who successfully date, meet great men, and get into relationships or even marriages. I've had marriages happen for women in their late 60s with clients that I've worked with. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I think that love is evergreen, and I think it's available. And I'm not saying that it's always easy, but it's not always easy to meet high quality men, but I think it's absolutely possible. And I think that can happen because I see it happen with my clients over 55 frequently. So hopefully that helps a little bit. Kathy says, what if you've given up? Well, you know what? I think that's understandable because you know what? Sometimes we get into situations where we're disappointed and maybe we've been hurt Maybe we've been let down enough times that it's hard to maintain and find hope. And sometimes there has to be some healing time and some time for processing or working through whatever may have happened that may have caused that hurt and that disappointment. And sometimes the right thing is not necessarily to give up, but to allow yourself some space and time to work through that process and to determine what you really want for your life, and if having a relationship is still something that you really want to seek in your life. And if it is, then I think that it's a matter of doing some healing work and finding the path forward, which oftentimes after a really difficult or painful experience, and I don't know what your background is, Kathy, but sometimes it's baby steps. It's important that we take good care of ourselves and we're gentle with ourselves, because you know what, there's a lot of things that go on in individual people's lives that are true traumas that we have to recover from. And I know in my own life, to find the path forward to love, I had to do a variety of different things that included counseling, that included coaching, that included support from a lot of sources, because there were times that I felt like I had given up and didn't believe that there was hope for me to have the relationship with my dreams. So be gentle with yourself, have self-compassion, and sometimes a good question to ask is, just what is the next best step for me? Even if it's a baby step, even if it's a healing step that doesn't necessarily seem related to love, dating, or relationships. So we're giving you a group hug here of love and compassion. All right, let's see. Leilani, I have a lover from Brazil who I met traveling with a van life. We were friends for 7 months and then became intimate. He now got word he has to leave the country soon, and he left unexpectedly to continue his travels. He feels distant. He is young at heart, and I'm 53. I love this man, his energy, his lifestyle, and his heart. I do not know how much to share. I desire to see him again. What is up with this? Maybe this is just young and wanting to travel and be free. Help, my heart is sad. So here's the thing. This does sound like this is someone who's maybe in a little different phase of life than maybe you are, and maybe has different relationship desires or needs than what you may have at this time of life. And that's kind of what it sounds like just from the outside looking in. So maybe this intimacy that you've shared was the kind of connection that he's looking for. Like I started with, just because a man is interested in dating or even intimacy or sex does not necessarily mean that he's ready or looking for a relationship, which is one of the reasons that I think, generally speaking, it's a good idea to have some of those kind of conversations earlier on rather than later on, and to hold off on intimacy if you're really wanting to have that intimate connection, mean that you're like coming together as being in partnership or exploring a deeper kind of relationship. So it may be that he's in a different place than you are. And the truth is, we don't have the opportunity or ability, even if we wanted to control another person. And it does sound like maybe he wants to be young and free and travel. And, one other thing you can do is talk to him and ask him. I mean, here's the thing. From my perspective, if you've been intimate with someone, you've been intimate in a physical way, you can be intimate in an emotional way, and at least ask and share, because then at least you know the truth and you can base your actions and your decisions based on the truth. Okay, the truth sets us free, even if sometimes it's painful. Ugh, right?